The coffee machine hissed and sputtered on the countertop, breaking the heavy silence that filled the kitchen, and Donald watched the dark liquid drip into the glass pot with a sense of melancholy that he could not quite place. It was a Tuesday morning, like any other, but the air felt thin and cold despite the warmth of the toaster oven, where he was carefully preparing 2 bagels just the way his wife Glenda liked them. Slightly burnt on the edges, with a thick layer of cream cheese spread edge to edge, Donald wiped his hands on his worn apron, the one with the faded picture of a grilling spatula that his son Leo had given him for Father's Day 3 years ago. He looked at the clock on the microwave and saw that it was 7:15, which meant Glenda would be storming down the stairs any second now, in a whirlwind of expensive perfume and high stress. Donald was a simple man by most standards, and he worked as a high school history teacher at the local public school. A job that did not pay a fortune, but one that filled him with a deep sense of purpose, because he believed in guiding the next generation. He loved the smell of old textbooks and the quiet dust motes dancing in the library light, but he knew that his world was vastly different from the one his wife inhabited. Glenda was a senior marketing executive at a massive tech conglomerate, a company that seemed to consume her soul 1 hour at a time. She made 3 times his salary, and she never let him forget it, not with words necessarily, but with the way she sighed when he suggested a budget-friendly vacation, or the way she rolled her eyes when he fixed things around the house instead of hiring a professional. The sound of sharp heels clicking rapidly against the hardwood floor signaled her arrival. Glenda swept into the kitchen, looking immaculate in a charcoal-grey power suit that probably cost more than Donald's car. Her hair was pulled back in a tight, severe bun that pulled at the corners of her eyes, giving her a permanent look of skepticism. She was typing furiously on her phone, her thumbs moving as a blur over the glass screen, and she did not look up when she grabbed the travel mug Donald held out to her. "Morning, honey," Donald said softly, trying to catch her eye, hoping for a glimmer of the woman he had married 10 years ago, the woman who used to laugh at his terrible puns and hold his hand during thunderstorms. Glenda took a sip and grimaced slightly before finally looking at him. "We are out of the good coffee beans, Donald. I told you to go to the specialty store downtown, not the supermarket. This tastes like burnt water." "I am sorry," Donald said, instinctively apologizing, even though he had bought the expensive bag she asked for. "I will pick up a fresh bag today after school. Do you have time for a bagel? I made them the way you like." Glenda glanced at the plate and then back at her phone, shaking her head as if the mere suggestion was an insult to her schedule. "I do not have time for carbs, Donald. I have a meeting with David in 20 minutes, and if I am late, he will have my head on a platter. We are closing the merger deal this week, and everything has to be perfect. David." The name hung in the air between them like a toxic gas. David was Glenda's boss, the CEO of the company, and a man Donald had only met twice. Both times David had treated Donald with a sneering condescension, shaking his hand loosely, while looking over Donald's shoulder as if searching for someone more important to talk to. David was everything Donald was not. He was wealthy, powerful, arrogant, and drove a sports car that roared like a beast. Glenda spoke about David constantly. David's vision, David's strategy, David's genius. It sometimes felt like there were 3 people in their marriage, and Donald was the third wheel. "I thought the merger was finished last month," Donald said, trying to keep the conversation going, trying to find a tether to his wife before she floated away for the day. "It is never finished, Donald. That is what you do not understand about the corporate world. It is relentless." Glenda snapped, grabbing her purse. "Look, I am going to be late coming home tonight, maybe very late. So do not wait up, and make sure Leo does his math homework. He has been slacking off, and I do not want him ending up at a state college because he cannot do basic algebra." Donald felt a sting of defensiveness, but he swallowed it down. Leo was a bright kid, creative and kind, just like his father, but Glenda pushed him hard, wanting him to be a prodigy, to fit into her world of high stakes and high returns. "I will help him, do not worry," Donald said, leaning in to kiss her cheek, but she turned her head at the last second, so his lips only grazed her ear. "I have to go," Glenda said already, moving toward the door, her attention back on her screen. "Oh, and Donald, I need you to sign for a package today. It is my new dress for the gala next month. Do not let them leave it on the porch." And just like that, she was gone, leaving Donald, standing alone in the kitchen with 2 cooling bagels and the echo of the front door slamming shut. He let out a long breath and looked out the window at the driveway, watching her luxury sedan back out and speed away. He loved her so much it hurt. He remembered the days when they were poor and happy, eating instant noodles in a studio apartment, dreaming of the future. Now they had the future, they had the big house in the suburbs, and the 2 cars and the sun. But the happiness seemed to have evaporated, leaving only schedules and expectations. Donald went upstairs to wake Leo. His son was 7 years old, with messy brown hair and a smile that could light up a room. When Donald entered the room, Leo was already awake, building a complex structure out of plastic bricks on the floor. "Hey, champion, time to get ready for school," Donald said, his voice shifting to a warm, cheerful tone. "Dad, look, I made a fortress to protect the castle," Leo said, holding up the jagged construction. "That is amazing, buddy. Very sturdy engineering," Donald said, crouching down to admire it. "Hurry up and get dressed. I made pancakes for you since Mom had to leave early." Leo's face fell slightly. "She is gone already." "Yeah, big meeting with David," Donald said, regretting the words as soon as they left his mouth. "She is always with David," Leo mumbled, kicking at the rug. Donald felt a knot tighten in his stomach. Even the child noticed. He ruffled Leo's hair and tried to smile. "She is working hard for us, Leo, so we can have nice things. Now come on, or we will be late." The drive to school was quiet. After dropping Leo off, Donald drove to the high school where he worked. The day was a blur of lectures on the American Revolution and grading papers, but his mind kept drifting back to Glenda. He missed her. He missed them. He felt like he was losing a war he didn't even know he was fighting. During his lunch break in the staff lounge, he sat with his colleague and friend Marcus, a science teacher, who had gone through a messy divorce 2 years prior. "You look like you are carrying the weight of the world on those shoulders," Don Marcus said, peeling an orange. "It is Glenda," Donald admitted, staring at his sandwich without appetite. "She is just so distant lately, always working, always David this and David that. I feel like I am just the housekeeper who pays half the bills." Marcus paused, looking at Donald with a serious expression. "Look, I do not want to be that guy, but are you sure it is just work?" "What do you mean?" Donald asked, frowning. "I mean late nights, constant mention of the boss, the new clothes, the mood swings." Marcus listed them off on his fingers. "It is a classic pattern, Don." Donald shook his head vigorously. "No way. Glenda is ambitious, yes, and she can be cold, but she's not a cheater. She values loyalty. We have been together since college. She is just stressed about the merger." Marcus shrugged. "If you say so, buddy. But just keep your eyes open. Sometimes we see what we want to see because the truth is too ugly to look at." The word stuck with Donald for the rest of the afternoon. The truth is too ugly to look at. He thought about the title of the article he had read online the other day about DNA testing and family secrets. He had dismissed it then, but now a strange paranoia began to itch at the back of his mind. He pushed it away. He trusted Glenda. He had to. When he got home that evening, the house was dark. Leo was at soccer practice, so Donald had an hour to himself. He saw the package on the porch, Glenda's dress, and brought it inside. He placed it on the dining table, and then he saw a piece of paper lying on the counter. It was a travel itinerary. He picked it up, curious. It was a reservation for a flight and a hotel stay for this coming weekend. A suite at the Sapphire Bay Resort, a super-exclusive hotel 3 hours away on the coast. The reservation was for 2 people. Donald's heart leaped. Was this a surprise? Was Glenda planning a romantic getaway for their anniversary, which was coming up in 2 weeks? Maybe she was doing it early because of her schedule. He looked at the dates. Departing tomorrow, returning Sunday. Tomorrow was Wednesday. Why would they go in the middle of the week? Then he heard the garage door open. Glenda was home early, which was a miracle in itself. She walked in looking flustered, her face flushed. She stopped when she saw Donald holding the itinerary. "Oh, you found it," she said, tossing her keys on the counter. "Is this for us?" Donald asked, a smile tentatively forming on his lips. "Are we going to Sapphire Bay?" Glenda laughed, a short, sharp sound that lacked any humor. "For us." "Donald, be serious. That is for the business retreat. The entire executive team is going. David rented out the top floor for strategy meetings regarding the merger. I have to be there to oversee the marketing rollout." Donald's smile vanished like smoke. "Oh, I see. I thought maybe since our anniversary is coming up." "We will celebrate the anniversary when I get back." Glenda cut him off, walking to the fridge and grabbing a bottle of sparkling water. "This is work, Donald, strictly work. I have to pack. I leave tomorrow morning at 6. Donald watched her walk away and felt a sudden surge of something he rarely let himself feel. Anger. Not just disappointment, but a hot, burning frustration. He worked hard, too. He supported her. He raised their son almost single-handedly while she chased her career. And she couldn't even spare a weekend for him without making it sound like a burden. Later that night, while Glenda was in the shower, Donald sat on the edge of the bed. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. He glanced at it. A text message preview popped up. It was from a contact saved simply as boss. "Can't wait for the view from the suite. Make sure you wear that red dress." Donald stared at the screen until it went black. The text was ambiguous. The view from the suite could mean the ocean. The red dress could be for a formal business dinner. But the tone, it felt intimate, it felt wrong. Glenda came out of the bathroom wrapped in a towel, drying her hair. She noticed him looking at the phone. "Did someone call?" she asked sharply. "No, just a notification." Donald lied, his voice steady, despite the thumping in his chest. She picked up the phone immediately, unlocked it, and typed a quick reply before setting it face down. "I'm going to sleep. I have to be up early. Don't forget to take Leo to the dentist on Thursday." She turned off the lamp, plunging the room into darkness. Donald lay there beside her, listening to her breathing even out as she fell asleep. He could not close his eyes. The doubt that Marcus had planted the coldness of her demeanor, the text message, it was all swirling in his head. He looked at the ceiling and realized he could not live like this anymore. He needed to know. He needed to be sure. The next morning, Glenda left before sunrise. She kissed him on the forehead while he pretended to be asleep, a cold, perfunctory peck that felt more like a stamp of ownership than a gesture of love. When he heard her car drive away, he sat up in bed. He got up and went through the motions of the morning routine. He made breakfast for Leo, packed his lunch and drove him to school, but his mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about the Sapphire Bay Resort. He was thinking about the red dress. He arrived at the school and walked to the principal's office. He had never taken a personal day in 5 years. He had accumulated weeks of leave. "I have a family emergency," Donald told the principal. "I need to take the rest of the week off starting now." The principal, surprised by Donald's serious tone, agreed immediately. Donald left the school and got into his modest sedan. He sat behind the wheel, gripping it, until his knuckles turned white. He checked his bank account on his phone. He had been saving money for a new deck, a surprise for Glenda. He had enough. He was not going to sit at home and wonder. He was not going to be the pathetic husband waiting for scraps of affection. He was going to Sapphire Bay. If it was a business trip, he would surprise her with flowers and maybe take her out to dinner after her meetings. She might be annoyed, but she couldn't fault him for loving her. And if it wasn't a business trip, if it was something else, well, he needed to see that too. He drove home and packed a small bag. He threw in his best suit, a crisp white shirt, and the small velvet box he had been hiding in his sock drawer, the one containing a diamond eternity band he had bought for their anniversary. He called his mother, who lived 20 minutes away. "Mum, can you take Leo for a few days?" Donald asked, trying to keep his voice light. "Glenda and I are going on a spontaneous trip, a romantic getaway." "Of course, sweetie," his mother said, delighted. "It is about time you two had some fun. Drop him off." Donald dropped Leo at his grandmother's house, giving him a tight hug. "Be good for Grandma, okay, Leo?" "Daddy has to go do something important." "Is it about the fortress?" Leo asked, innocent eyes wide. "Yeah, buddy." Donald swallowed the lump in his throat. "It is about protecting the fortress." He got back into his car and merged onto the highway heading south toward the coast. The drive was long and gave him too much time to think. He replayed every interaction with Glenda over the last 6 months. The late nights, the locked phone, the new passwords, the way she flinched when he touched her. The pieces were all there, but he had refused to put them together because the picture they formed was terrifying. As the miles rolled by, the landscape changed from suburban sprawl to rolling green hills, and finally, to the salt-scrubbed coastline. The ocean appeared on his right, a vast expanse of blue that usually brought him peace, but today looked turbulent and grey under the overcast sky. He reached the town where the Sapphire Bay Resort was located. It was a playground for the wealthy, a place of manicured lawns, high gates, and valet parking. Donald's sedan looked out of place among the Bentleys and Porsches lining the entrance. He felt a wave of insecurity, but he pushed it down. He was her husband. He had a right to be here. He pulled up to the front gate where a uniformed guard stopped him. "Reservation name?" the guard asked, looking skeptically at Donald's car. "I do not have a reservation." "I am here to surprise my wife, Donald," said, trying to sound confident. "She is a guest here. Glenda Miller. She is with the Retrotech group." The guard checked his clipboard. "Ah, yes, the Retrotech corporate retreat. They are in the main penthouse wing. Go ahead, sir, park to the left." Donald drove through the gates, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He parked the car and grabbed his bag. He stopped at the hotel florist in the lobby and bought a massive bouquet of red roses, spending way more than he was comfortable with. But he wanted this to be perfect. He wanted to shame her doubt with his overwhelming love. He walked up to the reception desk. The lobby was a cathedral of marble and gold, with chandeliers that looked like frozen explosions of crystal. "Hi, I am here to see my wife, Glenda Miller." Donald told the receptionist, a young woman with a perfectly practiced smile. "She is in the penthouse suite, I believe." The receptionist typed into her computer. "Ms. Miller?" "Yes. She is in the royal suite. But, sir, she is currently listed as Do Not Disturb." "It is a surprise," Donald said, leaning in. "I am her husband. Can you just give me a key card so I can set up the flowers before she gets back from her meeting?" The receptionist hesitated, looking at him and then at the flowers. It was strictly against protocol, but Donald had that look of a desperate, hopeful puppy that made people want to help him. "Okay," she whispered, sliding a key card across the marble. "But if she gets mad, it is on you. Suite 505. Top floor." "Thank you," Donald said, grabbing the key. He walked to the elevator, the flowers heavy in his arm. The ride to the 5th floor felt like it took an eternity. He watched the numbers climb 2, 3, 4, 5. The doors slid open with a soft chime. The hallway was silent, lined with thick plush carpet that swallowed his footsteps. He walked towards Suite 505. His palms were sweating. He imagined the look on her face. She would be shocked, maybe a little embarrassed, but surely she would be happy to see him. Surely she would realize that he loved her enough to drive 3 hours just to see her smile. He reached the door. It was a massive double door made of dark mahogany. He held the key card up to the sensor. The light turned green. Donald took a deep breath. This was it, the grand gesture. He pushed the handle down and prepared to walk into his future, not knowing that the world he knew was about to shatter into a million irreparable pieces. The green light on the door handle blinked innocently, a small beacon of access that Donald thought was the gateway to a romantic surprise. But as the heavy mahogany door unlatched with a soft mechanical click, he felt a sudden and inexplicable chill run down his spine. He did not push the door open immediately. His hand hovered over the cool metal of the handle, trembling slightly. The bouquet of red roses in his other arm suddenly felt like lead, a heavy burden of thorns and velvet petals that seemed ridiculous in the opulent silence of the hotel hallway. He took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of lemon polish and expensive carpet cleaner, trying to steady his nerves. He told himself he was being silly. He was her husband. This was his wife. There was nothing to fear. He pushed the door. It swung inward silently on well-oiled hinges, revealing a short entryway that led into the main living area of the suite. Donald stepped inside, and the door clicked shut behind him, automatically sealing him in. The air in the suite was cool and smelled of lavender and something else, something muskier and familiar. A man's cologne, not his cologne. It was a scent he recognized from the few times he had stood near David at company holiday parties, a sharp, aggressive scent of sandalwood and leather that cost more per ounce than Donald earned in a week. Donald stood frozen in the entryway, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. To his right there was a small console table. On it sat a leather briefcase. It was not Glenda's sleek laptop bag. It was a vintage brown leather attaché with gold buckles, and right there on the handle, embossed in gold leaf, were the initials Dr. David Reynolds. The flowers in Donald's arm crinkled as his grip tightened. His mind tried to rationalize it. Maybe David was here for a meeting. Maybe they were working in the living room, but it was 7 in the evening. And there was no sound of typing, no sound of PowerPoint presentations or strategy discussions. Then he heard it. It was a sound that shattered his world more effectively than a sledgehammer. It was a laugh, Glenda's laugh, but not the stressed, short laugh she gave him when he made a dad joke, or the polite laugh she used at dinner parties. This was a throaty, uninhibited laugh, a sound of pure pleasure and relaxation that he hadn't heard from her in years. "Oh, stop it, David. You are terrible." She giggled, her voice echoing from the adjacent room, which Donald assumed was the master bedroom. Donald took a step forward, his shoes sinking into the thick carpet, making his movement silent. He felt like a ghost haunting his own life. He reached the end of the entryway where the room opened up. He did not step into the open view. He pressed his back against the wall, peering around the corner, just enough to see the reflection in the large decorative mirror hanging on the opposite wall of the living area. The living room was empty, but the door to the bedroom was wide open. Through the mirror he could see the edge of the king-sized bed. He saw a discarded suit jacket on the floor, David's jacket, and next to it, a pile of fabric that shimmered in the dim light. The red dress. The dress Donald had signed for yesterday. The dress she was supposed to wear for the gala next month. It lay in a crumpled heap, like a shed skin. The voices became clearer now, drifting out of the bedroom, with a casual cruelty that made Donald's stomach turn. "I cannot believe he actually bought the bagel thing," David's voice boomed, rich and arrogant. "Does he really think that makes up for his lack of ambition? It is pathetic, Glenda." Donald stopped breathing. He felt the blood drain from his face, leaving him cold and dizzy. They were talking about him. "He tries David," Glenda's voice replied, but it was different now. It lacked the sharpness she used with Donald. It was submissive, eager to please. "He is just simple. Donald is content with his little teaching job and his little life. He does not understand people like us. He does not understand power. Simple." The word hung in the air like a foul odor. Donald had always thought of himself as steady, loyal, and grounded, but to her he was just simple. "He is a weight around your neck," David said. "You are a shark, Glenda. You belong at the top of the food chain. You need a partner who can swim with you, not an anchor who drags you down to the bottom of the ocean with coupons and budget vacations." Glenda laughed again, and there was the distinct sound of a glass clinking against a bottle. Champagne. They were drinking champagne. "I know," she sighed. "But it is complicated. We have the house, we have Leo. He is good with Leo. I will give him that. He is practically a glorified babysitter, which frees me up to be here with you." A glorified babysitter. The label stung his eyes, bringing hot tears that blurred his vision. He dedicated his life to their son. He helped with homework, he coached the soccer team, he cooked the meals, he wiped the tears. He did it because he was a father, because he loved his son. To hear it reduced to a convenience for her affair was a dagger in his heart. "You should leave him," David said, his voice lowering, becoming huskier. "Imagine what we could do together, Glenda. No more sneaking around, no more pretending. You and me running the company, running the city. You could have everything." "I am working on it," Glenda whispered. "I just need to make sure the finances are structured right. I do not want him taking half of my bonuses in the divorce. He contributed nothing to my success. Why should he get paid for it?" "Because the law is stupid," David replied. "But we can fix that. My lawyers are the best. We can make it look like he was negligent. Or maybe we can find something else." There was a silence then, followed by the sound of movement, the rustling of sheets and a low moan that made Donald want to cover his ears. But he couldn't move. He was rooted to the spot by a horror so profound it felt like paralysis. He was watching his life being dismantled casually over a glass of champagne. He clenched his jaw so hard his teeth creaked. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to run into that room, to throw the roses at them, to scream until his throat bled, to punch David in his smug, arrogant face, and to shake Glenda until she realized what she was destroying. He wanted to rage. He wanted to be the storm they didn't expect. He took a step away from the wall, his foot heavy, but then he stopped. He looked at the roses in his hand. If he went in there now, what would happen? David was powerful. David had money. David had lawyers who could twist reality until Donald looked like the villain. Glenda would deny everything, or worse, she would look at him with that cold, pitying stare and tell him it was over, and he would be escorted out by security like a criminal. He would lose. He would lose his dignity, he would lose the element of surprise, and most terrifyingly, he might lose Leo. If they were planning to paint him as negligent, he needed to be careful. He needed to be smarter than he had ever been in his life. He remembered Glenda's words. "He is just simple." Let them think that Donald thought a cold resolve hardening in his chest, replacing the panic. "Let them think I am simple. Let them think I am stupid. He slowly stepped back. He did not drop the flowers. Leaving them would be a sign. It would tell them he had been there. It would warn them. He needed them to feel safe. He needed them to feel arrogant and untouchable. He backed into the entryway. He could still hear them, the sounds of their intimacy, growing louder, more fevered. It was a torture he would never forget, a nightmare that would play on a loop in his mind for the rest of his life. But he forced himself to endure it for 10 more seconds as he reached for the door handle. He turned the handle with agonizing slowness, praying it wouldn't click. He opened the door just enough to slip through. He stepped out into the hallway. He pulled the door shut, holding the handle turned so the latch wouldn't make a sound, releasing it. Only when the door was fully flush with the frame. Click. The sound was barely audible, but to Donald it sounded like a gunshot. He stood there for a moment, staring at the wood grain of the door. Inside that room his wife was betraying him, with a man who despised him. Inside that room his marriage was dead. He turned and walked down the hallway. He did not run. He forced his legs to move in a steady rhythm. 1, 2, 1, 2. He passed a housekeeper pushing a cart, who looked at him and the roses with a smile. "She will love them, sir," the housekeeper said kindly. Donald didn't trust his voice. He just nodded a jerky mechanical motion and kept walking. He reached the elevator and pressed the button. When the doors opened, he stepped inside and watched the numbers descend. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. He walked through the lobby. The receptionist who had given him the key was busy on the phone and didn't see him leave. He walked out the automatic sliding doors and into the cool evening air. The ocean breeze hit his face, but it didn't feel refreshing. It felt clammy. He walked to his car, parked in the shadows away from the supercars. He opened the back door and tossed the roses onto the floorboard. Some of the petals broke off, scattering like drops of blood on the grey upholstery. He slammed the door. He got into the driver's seat. He put the key in the ignition, but he didn't turn it. A wave of nausea rolled over him, violent and undeniable. He opened the car door and leaned out, retching onto the asphalt. His body convulsed, expelling the meager lunch he had eaten, trying to purge the toxicity of what he had just witnessed. He gasped for air, his eyes watering, his throat burning. He sat back up, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. He was shaking uncontrollably now, the shock wearing off and the adrenaline crashing. He gripped the steering wheel so hard his hands hurt. He couldn't go home. If he went home, he would break things. He would scream. He needed to be somewhere where he could think, where he could plan. He started the car and drove out of the resort gates. He didn't look back at the towering hotel structure that loomed against the night sky like a monument to his failure. He drove for 10 miles until he found a budget motel on the side of the highway, the kind with neon flickering signs and thin walls. He paid cash for a room. Inside the room was musty and the carpet was stained, but Donald didn't care. He sat on the edge of the sagging mattress and stared at the blank television screen. He replayed the conversation in his head. Glorified babysitter. Negligent. My lawyers can fix that. They were coming for him. They weren't just going to break his heart, they were planning to ruin his life, to take his son, to leave him with nothing. Glenda wasn't just falling out of love, she was conspiring against him. And then a darker thought crept in, a thought that had been planted by David's mockery and fertilized by the sheer depth of Glenda's deception. David had mocked his genetics. Glenda had said he was just a babysitter. Donald reached for his wallet and pulled out a picture of Leo. He looked at the boy's smile. Leo had brown hair like Donald, but his eyes were hazel. Donald had blue eyes. Glenda had brown eyes. It was genetically possible, of course, but David had hazel eyes. The room seemed to spin again. No, that was impossible. Glenda had been loyal back then. They were happy back then, weren't they? But she had lied so easily today. She had lied so easily about the merger, about the dress, about everything. If she could lie about this, what else had she lied about? How long had she known David? How long had this ambition been eating away at her morals? Donald felt a cold, hard stone form in the pit of his stomach. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about the truth, the whole truth. He took out his phone. He had to be normal. He had to play the game. He typed a text message to Glenda. His fingers felt like foreign objects as he tapped the keys. Hey, honey, hope the presentation went well. Leo and I miss you. Love you. He stared at the words. Love you. It was the biggest lie he had ever told, but it was a necessary weapon. He hit send. He lay back on the bed, fully clothed, staring at the water stains on the ceiling. He wouldn't sleep tonight. He had work to do. He needed to know everything. He needed to check the bank accounts, the credit cards, the phone records, and most terrifying of all, he needed to know if the boy he loved more than life itself was actually his. Tomorrow, he would go back to the city. Tomorrow, he would stop being the simple teacher. Tomorrow, the investigation would begin. And if they wanted a war, he would bring them a war they would never see coming. The neon sign of the motel buzzed outside the window, a rhythmic electric hum that matched the throbbing headache behind Donald's eyes. He had not slept more than an hour, tossing and turning on the scratchy sheets, his mind replaying the sounds from the hotel room over and over again like a broken record. The laughter, the clinking glasses, the cruelty. But as the sun began to creep through the thin curtains, Donald forced himself to sit up. The despair that had paralyzed him the night before was gone, replaced by a cold, mechanical focus. He was no longer just a husband or a teacher. He was a man on a mission, and his first objective was to secure the perimeter. He drove back to his mother's house to pick up Leo. He hugged his son tighter than usual, burying his face in the boy's messy hair, smelling the scent of strawberry shampoo and innocence. Leo squirmed and laughed, oblivious to the fact that his father's world had ended. "Did you save the fortress, Daddy?" Leo asked as he buckled his seatbelt. "I am working on it, buddy," Donald said, his voice steady. "We have a few more battles to fight, but we are going to win." He brought Leo home and spent the rest of the weekend cleaning the house. He scrubbed the floors, he mowed the lawn, he folded the laundry. He wanted the house to look perfect. He wanted to create a stage so flawless that Glenda would never suspect the trap door beneath her feet. When Sunday evening arrived, he was ready. He sat on the couch, grading papers, a mug of tea steaming beside him, looking for all the world like the simple content man Glenda believed him to be. The garage door opened. Donald's heart gave a single painful throb, and then settled into a slow, icy rhythm. Glenda walked in, dragging her suitcase. She looked exhausted, her makeup slightly smudged. Her shoulders slumped. It was a performance, Donald realized. She was playing the part of the overworked executive returning from a grueling business trip. "Hey, stranger," Donald said, looking up with a smile that felt like a mask glued to his face. "How was the retreat? Did you get the marketing strategy sorted out?" Glenda sighed, dropping her keys in the bowl. "It was a nightmare, Donald. Endless meetings. David is never satisfied. He kept us up until 2 in the morning going over spreadsheets. I am absolutely drained." Donald watched her carefully. He saw the faint hickey on her neck that she had tried to cover with foundation. He saw the way she avoided direct eye contact. "That sounds rough," he said, standing up and walking over to her. He leaned in to kiss her, and she offered her cheek. He smelled it again, the lingering trace of sandalwood cologne beneath her perfume. It made his stomach churn, but he didn't flinch. "I made lasagna. It is in the oven. Why don't you go take a shower and relax?" "You are a lifesaver," she said, patting his arm patronizingly. "I do not know what I would do without you, Donald." "Really?" She went upstairs, and Donald waited until he heard the water running. The moment the pipes groaned, he moved. He did not go to her purse or her phone. That was amateur. She would have those locked down tight. Instead, he went to the home office. Glenda rarely used the desktop computer, preferring her company laptop, but she synced her cloud storage to the family network for photos. Donald sat down and woke the screen. He didn't know her work passwords, but he knew her. He knew she was arrogant. He guessed she used the same variations of passwords for her personal banking that she used for everything else. He tried Leo 2015. Incorrect. He tried Success 2023. Incorrect. He paused, thinking about what he had heard in the hotel room. "You are a shark, Glenda." He typed Shark Week 88. The screen flashed and unlocked. He didn't waste time looking at photos. He went straight to the browser history and the saved financial bookmarks. He found a banking portal for an offshore account he had never seen before. It was under a shell company name, GM Consulting. He couldn't access the funds without a 2-factor authentication code, but he could see the statements that had been downloaded to the hard drive. He opened the most recent PDF. The numbers made his breath catch in his throat. Deposits of $10,000, $15,000, sometimes $20,000 every month for the past 2 years. The reference lines were vague. Consultation fees, retainer, bonus structure. This wasn't just salary. This was hush money, or dirty money. He quickly forwarded the PDFs to a new secure email address he had created at the motel. He cleared the browser. History wiped the recent documents list and stood up just as the water upstairs stopped running. He went back to the kitchen and pulled the lasagna out of the oven, his hands trembling slightly. She wasn't just cheating on him. She was building an escape pod, a war chest. She had been planning to leave him for a long time, and she was hoarding cash to make sure she kept everything while he would be left with a mortgage he couldn't afford on a teacher's salary. Over dinner, Glenda picked at her food, scrolling through her phone, so Donald said casually, pouring her a glass of wine, "I was thinking about the summer. Maybe we could take Leo to the Grand Canyon. I have some vacation time saved up." Glenda froze for a fraction of a second before taking a sip of wine. Her eyes darted to the side. The Grand Canyon. Oh, Donald, I don't know. The merger is going to be messy through August. I probably won't be able to get away. And besides, Leo needs to focus on his coding camp. We can't just drag him around the desert. Right, Donald said. Coding camp. I forgot. He didn't push it. He just gathered the data points. She was distancing herself from future plans. She was already uncoupling. The next morning after Glenda left for work, Donald called in sick. He drove to the city center to a nondescript office building made of grey stone. He had an appointment with Arthur Vance, a divorce attorney recommended by Marcus. Vance was known as the Butcher, in local legal circles a man who specialized in high-asset cases involving corporate infidelity. Vance was a small man with sharp eyes and a suit that looked like it had been slept in, but his office was lined with leather-bound books that smelled of victory. He listened to Donald's story without interrupting, tapping a silver pen against his desk. When Donald finished explaining about the hotel room, the overheard conversation and the secret bank account, Vance leaned back and steepled his fingers. "You are in a dangerous position," Donald Vance said, his voice gravelly. "But you did the right thing by not kicking down that door. If you had, you would have blown your leverage. Now we have the element of surprise. I want full custody," Donald said firmly. "I do not care about the money. I do not care about the house. I just want my son. They called me a babysitter. They are planning to frame me as negligent." Vance nodded grimly. "That is a common tactic. They will try to manufacture incidents. They will hire a private investigator to follow you, hoping to catch you drinking a beer or leaving the kid alone for 5 minutes. You need to be a saint from this moment forward. No speeding tickets, no late nights, impeccable records." "I can do that," Donald said. "But what about the money? Where is she getting it?" Vance pulled up a file on his computer. "I did a little digging on your wife's boss, David Reynolds. The man is a walking lawsuit. He has had 3 sexual harassment claims against him in the last 5 years. All of them vanished, settled out of court, sealed with NDAs. Donald felt a chill. What does that have to do with Glenda? Vance looked at Donald with pity. Donald, powerful men like Reynolds do not survive without help. They need enablers. They need someone on the inside to smooth things over, to pressure the victims into silence, to move the money around, so it looks like legitimate business expenses. That account you found, GM Consulting, my bet is that is her cut. She is not just his lover, Donald. She is his fixer. She cleans up his messes and he pays her for it. Donald felt sick. The image of Glenda, the woman he had married who used to cry at sad movies being the one to silence victims of harassment, was almost harder to process than the infidelity. It made her a monster. If we can prove that Vance set his eyes gleaming, we don't just win the divorce, we destroy them. We can expose the corruption, the fraud, the payouts, but we need hard evidence, we need emails, we need texts. And we need to know exactly how deep she is in. "I will get it," Donald vowed. "And there is one more thing," Vance said, hesitating for the first time. "You mentioned a comment about genetics, about your son being simple." Donald nodded, his throat tightening. "You need to know," Vance said softly. "If they play dirty, they might challenge paternity to deny you custody. If the boy isn't yours legally, you have no standing. You need to take a test. Today. Before we file anything." "I know," Donald whispered. "I bought the kit." He went home that afternoon. He picked Leo up from school early. "Hey, Dad, is everything okay?" Leo asked, looking concerned as he climbed into the car. "Everything is fine, champion," Donald said, forcing a smile. "I just missed you. Hey, I got us a new spy kit. It involves DNA profiling, to make sure we aren't clones." Leo's eyes lit up. "Cool, like in the movies." "Yeah," Donald said, his heart breaking. "Just like in the movies." At home in the privacy of the bathroom, Donald swabbed the inside of Leo's cheek. He tried to make it a game, joking and laughing, but inside he was dying. He swabbed his own cheek. He sealed the samples in the envelope and drove them to the post office, paying extra for the expedited overnight processing. The next 3 days were a blur of agony. Donald played the role of the house husband perfectly. He cooked, he cleaned, he listened to Glenda complain about her stressful work. He watched her texting David at the dinner table, knowing exactly who she was talking to. He gathered more evidence. He installed a keylogger on the home desktop. He found emails where Glenda discussed handling the situation in HR regarding a young intern who had complained about David. The language was cold, corporate, and ruthless. She wasn't a victim. She was an executioner. On Thursday afternoon, Donald was sitting in his car outside the school waiting for the bell to ring when his phone buzzed. An email notification. Subject: DNA paternity test results. Case 99281. Donald's hands shook so hard he almost dropped the phone. The world seemed to narrow down to that small glowing screen. The air in the car felt thin. He couldn't breathe. This was the moment. This was the truth that would either liberate him or destroy him completely. If Leo was his, he had a reason to fight. He had a bloodline to protect. He had a son. If Leo was David's, he closed his eyes and prayed. He prayed to a God he hadn't spoken to in years. "Please, let him be mine. Take everything else. Take the house. Take the dignity. Take the years of my life, but please don't take my son." He opened his eyes. He tapped the email. He scrolled past the technical jargon, the disclaimers, the liability text. He scrolled down to the bottom of the page where the result was highlighted in bold. Probability of paternity, 0.0%. The alleged father is excluded as the biological father of the child. Donald stared at the numbers. 0.0. He read it again and again. The phone slipped from his hand and clattered onto the floor mat. A sound escaped him, a low, guttural noise that didn't sound human. It was the sound of a soul being ripped in half. He wasn't his. Leo, the boy he had rocked to sleep, the boy he had taught to ride a bike, the boy whose scraped knees he had bandaged, was not his. He was David's. Glenda had been lying from the very beginning. The betrayal wasn't 2 years old, it was 7 years old. The entire foundation of his life was a fraud. Every Father's Day card, every hug, every "I love you, Daddy" was built on a lie. He leaned forward and vomited. Violent heaving spasms that racked his body until there was nothing left but dry heaves and tears. He gripped the steering wheel, gasping for air, feeling like he was drowning in a sea of filth. She had passed off her boss's child as his. She had let him raise another man's son while she climbed the corporate ladder with the biological father. They had laughed at him not just for being poor, but for being a cuckold of the highest order, a useful idiot who provided free childcare for their illegitimate spawn. The school bell rang. Donald looked up, wiping his mouth with a trembling hand. The doors of the school burst open and a flood of children poured out. He saw Leo in his bright yellow jacket looking around, scanning the line of cars for his dad. Leo saw Donald's car and waved, his face lighting up with that pure, unadulterated joy that Donald lived for. Donald looked at the boy. He looked at the hazel eyes. He looked at the smile. And in that moment, amidst the wreckage of his heart, something shifted. The biological link was gone. The DNA was zero. But as he watched Leo run toward the car, clutching a drawing, he had made Donald realize something else. David might have provided the biology. David might be the sperm donor. But David didn't know that Leo was afraid of the dark. David didn't know that Leo hated crusts on his sandwiches. David didn't know how to soothe Leo when he had a nightmare. Donald unlocked the doors. Leo climbed in, breathless and happy. "Daddy, look, I got an A on my spelling test." Donald looked at the paper. He looked at his son. The vomit taste was still in his mouth, but the resolve in his chest had turned into something terrifyingly cold. They thought this result would break him. They thought this would make him walk away. They were wrong. This didn't mean he had no son. It meant they had stolen his life, and he was going to make them pay for every single second of it. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting to save this innocent boy from the monsters who created him. Donald smiled a sad, broken smile. "That is amazing, Leo. I am so proud of you." He put the car in gear. The investigation was over. The war had officially begun, and Donald was done playing by the rules. The drive home from the school was a blur of autopilot turns and mechanical stops, but the silence in the car was heavy enough to crush a man. Leo chattered happily about his spelling test, unaware that the man driving the car was technically a stranger, according to biology. Donald listened to the boy's voice, and every giggle felt like a knife twisting in his gut. This child was the son of the man who called Donald a simpleton. This child was the product of the betrayal that had been rotting the foundation of his house for 7 years. Yet when Donald looked in the rearview mirror and saw Leo's messy hair and the gap-toothed smile, he didn't see David. He saw the nights spent soothing fevers. He saw the bike-riding lessons. He saw his son. Biology was a microscope, but love was a telescope. And Donald decided then and there that he was looking at the bigger picture. When they pulled into the driveway, Glenda's car was already there. Donald took a moment to compose himself. He checked his reflection in the mirror. His eyes were red-rimmed, but he could blame allergies. He took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of the pine air freshener and exhaling the rage that wanted to scream. He had to be the actor of a lifetime. He had to be the simple, clueless husband for just a little while longer. They entered the house and the smell of take-out Thai food filled the hallway. Glenda was in the kitchen, plating the food, still wearing her work clothes. She looked up and smiled a tight practice smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Hey boys, just in time for dinner," she said, her voice overly bright. "I was too tired to cook, so I grabbed pad thai." Donald walked over and kissed her cheek. It took every ounce of his willpower not to recoil, not to grab her by the shoulders and demand to know how she could look him in the eye every day for 7 years while living such a lie. But he just planted the kiss, feeling the coldness of her skin. "Smells great, honey," Donald said, his voice sounding distant to his own ears. "Leo, go wash your hands." Dinner was a torture session. Glenda sat across from him, scrolling through her phone while eating. She was physically present, but mentally she was miles away, likely in a text thread with David. "How was work?" Donald asked, testing the waters. "Oh, you know, crazy," Glenda replied without looking up. "David is pushing for this rebranding launch. He is such a visionary, but he demands perfection. We might have to work late again tomorrow." A visionary. The word made Donald grip his fork until his knuckles turned white. A visionary who slept with his employee's wife and fathered a child he refused to acknowledge. "Is the rebranding going well?" Donald pressed gently. "I know you mentioned there were some HR issues with an intern last week. Did that get resolved?" Glenda's thumb froze over her screen for a split second. It was a microscopic reaction, but Donald saw it. She looked up, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Why do you ask about that?" she said sharply. "Just making conversation." Donald shrugged, taking a bite of noodles that tasted like cardboard. "You seemed stressed about it." "It is handled," she said coldly, returning to her phone. The girl was confused. She misunderstood the corporate culture. "We let her go with a severance package. It is standard procedure." Standard procedure. The phrase echoed in Donald's mind later that night as he sat in the dark of his home office. Glenda had gone to bed early, claiming a migraine, but Donald knew she was just avoiding him. He waited until the house was silent, until the only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the distant passing of cars. He opened his laptop and pulled up the encrypted email account he had set up with Vance the lawyer. He also opened the folder containing the files he had siphoned from Glenda's computer. He needed to find out what standard procedure really meant. He started digging through the financial records of GM Consulting. He cross-referenced the dates of the large deposits with the dates of David's business trips. They matched perfectly. Every time David went away, Glenda got a bonus. But then he began to look at the outflows. The consulting firm wasn't just receiving money, it was paying it out. There were wire transfers to various law firms, there were payments to private investigation agencies, and there were direct payments to individuals. Women. Donald pulled up the list of names. Sarah Jenkins, Elena Rosales, Monica Wright. He searched for Sarah Jenkins online. He found a LinkedIn profile that ended abruptly 3 years ago. Former executive assistant at Retrotech. He dug deeper, finding a cached version of a personal blog where she alluded to a toxic work environment, and powerful men who take what they want. Then silence. No social media updates for years. He looked at the payment associated with her name in Glenda's file, $50,000. Labeled as settlement agreement, he moved to Elena Rosales, a marketing intern. Payment of $20,000, labeled as tuition assistance. Donald felt a cold sweat breaking out on his forehead. This wasn't just about cheating. This was a factory of abuse. David was using his power to prey on women, and Glenda wasn't just looking the other way. She was the paymaster. She was the one cutting the checks and buying the silence. He found an email thread from 2 years ago between Glenda and David. The subject line was, "The Rosales problem. David, she is getting weepy. She is threatening to go to the press. Fix it." And Glenda's reply sent 20 minutes later. Done. I threatened to blacklist her from the industry and told her we would release the photos from the party if she talked. She signed the NDA, sending the payment now. You owe me. Donald read the email 3 times, you owe me. She wasn't a victim of David's charm. She was a predator in her own right. She used these women's pain as leverage to climb the ladder to get more money to secure her position. She was a monster in a power suit. Donald picked up his phone and dialed Vance's number even though it was past midnight. The lawyer answered on the second ring, his voice alert. "Tell me you have something," Vance said. "I have everything," Donald whispered, his voice trembling with a mixture of horror and adrenaline. "It is not just an affair, Vance. It is a criminal enterprise. They are paying off women. Glenda is the enforcer. I have the emails, I have the bank records. She is blackmailing victims to protect him." There was a long silence on the other end. Then the sound of a chair creaking as Vance sat up. "Donald, listen to me very carefully," Vance said, his tone shifting from legal advisor to war general. "You have just found the nuclear bomb. This changes the entire landscape. In family court, adultery is one thing, but complicity in criminal harassment and extortion, that destroys her credibility completely. If we play this right, she won't just lose custody. She will go to prison." And David, Donald asked. "David loses his company," Vance said, "but we need to be careful. People with this kind of money are dangerous. If they know you have this, they will come for you. We need to strike first, and we need to strike hard. We need an ally on the inside or someone with enough power to shield you when the story breaks." "Who?" Donald asked. Vance paused. "David is married, isn't he?" "Yes," Donald said. "Her name is Victoria. I have never met her. She is old money. She owns a gallery downtown. If David is using company funds to pay off mistresses and using your wife as the conduit, he is stealing from the shareholders," Vance explained. "But more importantly, if he is humiliated publicly, his wife holds the keys to his social standing. If she turns on him, he is finished." "You want me to talk to his wife?" Donald asked. "I want you to verify everything first," Vance cautioned. "We need one of the victims to talk. We need a witness to corroborate the documents. Can you track down this Sarah Jenkins?" "I can try," Donald said. "Do it," Vance ordered. "And Donald, keep playing the role. Do not let Glenda see the anger. If she suspects you are onto the corruption, she will shred everything. You have to be the loving, stupid husband for a few more days. I can do that," Donald said grimly. He hung up the phone. He looked at the screen where Glenda's cruel words glowed in the darkness. "I threatened to blacklist her." He closed the laptop. He walked down the hall to Leo's room. He opened the door quietly and watched the boy sleeping, the moonlight casting a soft glow on his face, the face that shared David's genetics. But as Donald stood there, he didn't feel the revulsion he expected. He felt a fierce, protective fire. Leo was innocent. Leo was a victim, just like Sarah and Elena. Donald went back to his own bedroom. Glenda was asleep, sprawled out on the expensive sheets she had bought with her blood money. Donald lay down on the very edge of the bed, as far away from her as possible. He stared at the ceiling. The next morning he woke up before the alarm. He made coffee. He made bagels. When Glenda came down, he smiled and handed her the mug. "Here you go, honey," he said. "Good luck with the rebranding today." She took the coffee without a thank you. "You are in a good mood," she noted suspiciously. "Just feeling positive," Donald lied smoothly. "I was thinking about what you said. About me being content with my simple life. Maybe you are right. Maybe I should appreciate what I have." Glenda smirked, a look of triumph crossing her face. "I am glad you finally understand, Donald. Ambition is not for everyone. Someone has to keep the home fires burning. She left for work, confident that her husband was exactly where she wanted him. Subservient, ignorant, safe. As soon as her car disappeared around the corner, Donald moved. He called in sick to school again, using the excuse of a severe migraine. He got in his car and drove to the address he had found for Sarah Jenkins. It was a small apartment complex on the other side of the city, far from the gleaming towers of Retrotech. He knocked on the door. A woman opened it. She looked tired, wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt. She eyed him with suspicion. "Sarah Jenkins," Donald asked. "Who are you?" she asked, keeping the chain on the door. "My name is Donald Miller," Donald said quietly. "I am Glenda Miller's husband." The color drained from Sarah's face. She tried to slam the door, but Donald held up a hand, not pushing, just pleading. "Please," he said. "I know about the NDA. I know about the $50,000. I know what they did to you." Sarah froze. She stared at him through the crack in the door, her eyes wide with fear. "You need to leave," she whispered. "If she finds out I talked to you, she will destroy me. She told me she would make sure I never worked again." "She can't hurt you anymore," Donald said, his voice firm. "I'm going to stop them. But I need your help. I need you to tell me the truth. Not for me, but to make sure they never do this to anyone else." Sarah hesitated, searching his face. She saw the pain in his eyes, the same pain she carried. She saw that he wasn't there to threaten her. He was there because he was broken too. She undid the chain. "Come in," she said softly. Donald sat at her small kitchen table and listened for 2 hours. Sarah told him everything. She told him how David had cornered her in his office, how he had touched her, how she had gone to HR, thinking they would help, and how Glenda had walked into the room not as a comforting woman, but as a cold corporate executioner. Glenda had placed a folder on the table containing photos of Sarah drinking at a college party, implying they would paint her as an unstable alcoholic. Glenda had slid the check across the table and told her to sign or be ruined. "She enjoyed it," Sarah said, wiping tears from her cheeks. "That is the worst part. Glenda liked the power. She looked at me like I was an insect. She told me I should be grateful for the money because I wasn't worth half that much." Donald felt a physical sickness rising in his throat. The woman he slept next to, the woman who was the mother of his child, was a sociopath. "Thank you, Sarah," Donald said, standing up. "You are brave. Much braver than them." "What are you going to do?" Sarah asked. "I am going to burn their world down," Donald said. He left the apartment and sat in his car. He had the witness. He had the documents. He had the motive. Now he needed the detonator. He pulled up the contact information for the art gallery owned by Victoria Reynolds, David's wife, the woman who funded the empire, the woman who was being played for a fool, just like Donald. He dialed the number. "Reynolds Gallery. How may I direct your call?" A polished voice answered. "I need to speak with Victoria Reynolds," Donald said. "Mrs. Reynolds is busy. May I ask what this is regarding?" "Tell her it is about her husband," Donald said, his voice cold steel. "Tell her it is about the GM consulting account, and tell her I have the ledger." There was a pause, a long, heavy silence. "Hold, please." Donald waited. He looked out the window at the grey city sky. He was done being the teacher. He was done being the babysitter. He was the man holding the match, and he was about to drop it right into the center of their perfect lie. "This is Victoria Reynolds," a sharp, imperious voice came on the line. "Who is this, and what do you know about my husband's finances?" "My name is Donald Miller," Donald said. "My wife is Glenda. Your husband is sleeping with her. But that is the least of your problems, Mrs. Reynolds, because they are stealing from you to cover up his crimes. Can we meet?" He waited for the explosion. Instead, he heard a sharp intake of breath, followed by a voice that was trembling with a fury that matched his own. "Come to the gallery, the back entrance. Now." The rain had started to fall by the time Donald pulled his car into the narrow alleyway behind the Reynolds Gallery. It was a cold, biting rain that slicked the cobblestones and blurred the city lights into streaks of neon and grey. He checked the folder on the passenger seat one last time. It contained the printed bank statements, the emails regarding the payoffs, the affidavit from Sarah Jenkins, and the paternity test results. It was a dossier of destruction, and he was about to hand it to the one person who could detonate it. He stepped out of the car, pulling his coat tight against the wind. The back door of the gallery was heavy steel painted black, with a single security camera blinking above it like a red, unblinking eye. Donald pressed the buzzer. There was no voice on the intercom, just the loud metallic clank of the lock disengaging. He pushed the door open and stepped into a service corridor that smelled of cleaning chemicals and fresh paint. At the end of the hall, a woman stood waiting. Victoria Reynolds was intimidating in a way that Glenda tried to be, but could never quite achieve. Glenda's power was frantic, a result of constant climbing and maneuvering. Victoria's power was ancient and settled like a mountain. She wore a simple white silk blouse and black trousers, but the diamond studs in her ears probably cost more than Donald's house. Her hair was silver and cut in a sharp bob, and her eyes were the color of ice. "You are the teacher," she said, her voice echoing slightly in the concrete hallway. She didn't offer her hand. She stood with her arms crossed, guarding her territory. "I am Donald Miller," Donald said, stopping a few feet away. "Thank you for seeing me." "I almost didn't," Victoria replied, her gaze raking over his cheap suit and tired face. "My husband receives many threats, Mr. Miller. Usually they are from disgruntled former employees or competitors. This is the first time the husband of his mistress has called me directly. I assumed you were looking for a payout, a little hush money to go away quietly." Donald felt a flare of anger, but he clamped it down. He wasn't there to be insulted. "I don't want your money, Mrs. Reynolds. I want you to look at where your money has been going." He held out the folder. Victoria hesitated for a moment, looking at it as if it might be contaminated. Then she reached out with a manicured hand and took it. "Follow me," she said, turning on her heel. She led him into a private viewing room, a stark white space with a single abstract painting on the wall and a glass table in the center. She sat down and opened the folder. Donald stood opposite her, watching her face. At first her expression was bored. She flipped through the first few pages of bank transfers with a cynical detachment. She likely knew her husband was a cheater. She probably tolerated it, as long as it was discreet. But as she reached the emails, the ones detailing the fixer payments, her brow furrowed. "GM Consulting," she read aloud. "That is your wife's shell company." "Yes," Donald said. "Glenda set it up 2 years ago. Those funds payments of $20,000, $50,000, they are coming from your joint accounts and the Retrotech operational budget. They are being used to silence women your husband has assaulted." Victoria stopped flipping. Her head snapped up, her eyes narrowing. "Assaulted." Donald nodded. "There is a sworn statement in there from Sarah Jenkins. She was an executive assistant. Your husband cornered her. My wife threatened to destroy her reputation if she didn't sign an NDA. My wife paid her off with your money." Victoria looked back down at the papers. Her hands were no longer steady. She turned the page and saw the list of other names. Elena Rosales, Monica Wright. The sheer scale of it was undeniable. "He told me these were investment losses," Victoria whispered more to herself than to Donald. "He told me the market was volatile. He has been draining our liquidity to cover up his perversions." "Keep reading," Donald said softly. The last page. Victoria turned to the final document, the paternity test. She stared at the numbers. She stared at the conclusion. Excluded. She looked up at Donald, and for the first time the ice in her eyes cracked, revealing a deep well of humiliation and rage. "The boy," she asked, her voice barely audible. "The one you have been raising." "He is 7 years old," Donald said, his voice breaking slightly. "He has my last name. He calls me Dad. But biologically, he is David's. They have been doing this for a long time, Mrs. Reynolds. Since before the merger. Since before the consulting firm. They made me raise their son while they laughed at me behind my back." Victoria closed the folder. She placed her hand on top of it, pressing down hard, as if trying to crush the truth back into the paper. She took a deep breath, and when she looked at Donald again, the ice was back. But it was different now. It was sharper. It was weaponized. "You are a teacher." "Mr. Miller," she said, "do you teach history?" "Yes," Donald said, confused by the question. "Then you know that empires do not fall because of armies," Victoria said, standing up. "They fall because of rot from within. David thinks he is a king. He thinks he is untouchable because he married into my family's name and my family's connections. He forgot that the money belongs to me. The board seats belong to my family trust. He is nothing but a manager I hired to run my assets." She walked over to the wall and stared at the painting, a violent splash of red and black. "Glenda Miller," Victoria said, testing the name like it was poison. "She is the one who facilitated this. She is the one who hurt those women." "She is the architect," Donald said, David is the impulse, but Glenda is the execution. Victoria turned to face him. Her face was calm, terrifyingly so. Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, the board of directors is meeting. I called an emergency session 10 minutes ago. I'm going to freeze his access to the corporate accounts tonight. By the time he walks into that meeting, he will be bankrupt, and he won't even know it. I have a lawyer, Donald said. Arthur Vance. He is ready to file the divorce papers and a civil suit for fraud and emotional damages simultaneously. He has also prepared a package for the press, the detailed accounts of the payoffs, the NDAs, the shell company. Good, Victoria said. Burn it all. I want his reputation in ashes. I want him to be toxic. I want no one in this city to ever shake his hand again. And Glenda, Donald asked. Victoria walked closer to him. Her eyes were hard. You leave Glenda to me. You handle your divorce, Mr. Miller. But professionally, I am going to make sure she never works in this industry again. I am going to audit every cent she stole. She will be lucky if she isn't in prison by Christmas. Donald nodded. He felt a strange sense of relief. Not happiness, but the relief of a soldier finding an ally in a trench. We have a deal then. We have an alliance, Victoria corrected. Go home to your wife, Mr. Miller. Play your part for one more night. Let them sleep soundly. It makes the awakening that much more painful. Donald left the gallery and drove home. The rain had stopped leaving the streets slick and black. He felt lighter. The burden of the secret was now shared. The machinery of justice was grinding into motion. When he entered the house, it was quiet. Leo was already asleep. Donald walked into the kitchen and found Glenda sitting at the island, a glass of wine in her hand. She looked different tonight. There was a manic energy about her. Her eyes were bright and she was smiling at her phone. She looked up when he entered, and for the first time in months, she actually looked happy to see him. Donald, there you are, she said, setting her phone down. I was just about to text you. I have amazing news. Donald walked over and poured himself a glass of water, his movements slow and deliberate. Oh, did the rebranding launch go well? Better than well. Glenda beamed. The board is thrilled. David just texted me. He is putting me in for a massive promotion. Chief Operating Officer Donald, can you believe it? COO of Retrotech. It comes with a significant salary increase and stock options. We are going to be set for life. Donald took a sip of water, watching her over the rim of the glass. She was lying, or rather she was delusional. David had probably promised her the moon to keep her compliant while he drained the accounts, but neither of them knew that Victoria had already cut the strings. That is incredible, Glenda, Donald said, forcing a smile. You worked hard for this. I did, she said, nodding emphatically. I really did. And Donald, this changes things for us. I have been thinking. We need to secure our future. With this new position, I am going to be under a lot of scrutiny. Financial scrutiny. Donald's heart skipped a beat. Here it comes. What do you mean? He asked, playing innocent. Well, she said, reaching into her briefcase and pulling out a document. My financial advisor said it would be smart to separate some of our liabilities, just on paper, to protect the house and the savings in case of any corporate lawsuits. It is standard for executives. I need you to sign this quitclaim deed for the house. It just puts the title in my name solely so that if anyone sues me for business reasons, they can't come after the family home. Donald looked at the document. It was a transfer of deed. If he signed it, he would be giving her the house. She was trying to strip him of the assets before she filed for divorce. She wanted to kick him out on the street with nothing. I don't know, Glenda, Donald said, scratching the back of his neck, acting unsure. I don't really understand legal stuff. Shouldn't I have a lawyer look at it? Glenda's smile faltered for a second, hardening into impatience. Donald, don't be difficult. It is just paperwork. If you hire a lawyer, it will cost us thousands of dollars and delay everything. Do you want me to lose this promotion because you are being paranoid? Trust me. I am doing this for us. For Leo. For Leo. She used his son's name as a weapon every single time. Donald reached out and took the pen. He hovered it over the paper. He looked at her face. She was watching the pen with a hunger she couldn't hide. She didn't love him. She didn't respect him. She just wanted to win. He pulled the pen back. You know what he said? Putting the pen down. I am just too tired tonight. My brain is foggy. I want to make sure I sign it in the right places. Let me sleep on it. I will sign it first thing in the morning before you go to work. Glenda's eyes flashed with anger. but she quickly masked it. She couldn't push too hard or he might get suspicious. Fine, she snapped, snatching the paper back. But do it before breakfast. I need to file it tomorrow. Absolutely, Donald said. First thing tomorrow. He went upstairs and checked on Leo. He sat on the edge of the bed and watched the rise and fall of the boy's chest. He thought about the paternity test in the folder he had left with Victoria. He thought about the years of lies. I am sorry, Leo, he whispered. I am sorry for what is going to happen tomorrow. It is going to be loud and it is going to be scary. But I promise you when the dust settles, we will be okay. He went to his bedroom. Glenda was already in bed typing on her phone again. She didn't look up when he entered. She was likely texting David, telling him that the idiot husband had almost signed and that the house would be theirs by noon. Donald changed into his pajamas and climbed into bed. He lay on his back staring at the dark ceiling. Beside him, Glenda let out a contented sigh. Everything is falling into place, she murmured, half asleep. Yes. Donald thought his heart beating with a cold, steady rhythm. It certainly is. He closed his eyes, but he didn't sleep. He visualized the plan. At 8:00 a.m., Arthur Vance would file the divorce petition and the civil lawsuit at the courthouse. At 8:15 a.m., the press release would go out to every major news outlet in the city, containing the redacted bank statements and the affidavit from Sarah Jenkins. At 8:30 a.m., Victoria Reynolds would lock David out of the company servers. At 9 a.m., the board meeting would begin, and at 7 a.m. Donald would wake up and make coffee one last time. The night dragged on. The silence in the house was thick with unsaid words. Donald listened to the wind rattling the window pane. He felt a strange sense of detachment. The man who had cried in the car, the man who had vomited from grief, was gone. In his place was a machine built for justice. He thought about the simple life Glenda mocked. He thought about the weekends grading papers, the summers mowing the lawn, the quiet evenings watching TV. She had hated it. She had wanted drama power and excitement. Well, Donald thought as the first grey light of dawn began to touch the window. She is about to get all the excitement she can handle. The alarm clock on the nightstand flickered. 6:59 a.m. Donald watched the numbers change. 7 a.m. The alarm buzzed. He reached out and silenced it instantly. He sat up and swung his legs over the side of the bed. Glenda groaned, shifting under the covers. "Turn it off," she mumbled. "It is off," Donald said, his voice clear and strong. He stood up and walked to the window, pulling the curtains open. The sun was rising, piercing through the clouds, a brilliant, harsh light that flooded the room. "Wake up, Glenda," Donald said, turning to look at the lump under the duvet. "It is a big day." Glenda pulled the pillow over her head. "Go make coffee, Donald." "No," Donald said. The single word hung in the air. Glenda stopped moving. She slowly lowered the pillow and looked at him. "Excuse me," she said, confused by the tone she had never heard him use before. "I said no," Donald repeated, standing tall, his silhouette framed by the morning light. "I am not making coffee, and I am not signing the deed." Glenda sat up, her hair messy, her face puffy with sleep, but her eyes narrowing in confusion. "Donald, what is wrong with you? Are you having a midlife crisis?" "Just go downstairs." "I am done going downstairs," Donald said, walking to the closet and pulling out his suitcase, which he had packed while she was in the shower the night before. "And I am done with the lies." He threw the suitcase onto the bed next to her. The impact made her jump. "Get up," Donald said. "You have a board meeting at 9, don't you? You don't want to be late. It is going to be the most important meeting of your life." Glenda stared at the suitcase and then at him. A flicker of genuine fear crossed her face. "What do you know?" she whispered. Donald smiled, but it wasn't his usual warm smile. It was the smile of a man who held the detonator. "I know everything, Glenda. I know about Sarah. I know about the money. I know about the hotel room. And I know about Leo." Glenda's face went white. All the color drained away, leaving her looking like a wax figure. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Donald walked to the door and looked back at her. "You called me a babysitter," he said softly. "Well, the babysitter is quitting, and he is taking the house, the kid, and the dignity you thought you stole." He turned and walked out of the room, leaving her sitting in the wreckage of her morning, stunned and silent, as the phone on her nightstand began to buzz. It was David. Donald didn't need to answer it to know what the text said. He could guess. "My access is denied. What is going on?" He walked down the stairs feeling the adrenaline surge through his veins. He went to the kitchen, but he didn't make coffee. He poured a glass of orange juice for Leo. Leo came bounding down the stairs in his pajamas, rubbing his eyes. "Morning, Dad." "Morning, champion," Donald said, scooping him up in a hug that was fierce and final. "Go get dressed." "We are going to Grandma's house for breakfast." "Why?" Leo asked, yawning. "Because today is a holiday," Donald said, grabbing his keys. "What holiday is it?" Leo asked. "Independence Day," Donald said, opening the front door. He walked out into the cool morning air, holding his son's hand. He didn't look back at the house. He didn't look back at the window where he knew Glenda was frantically trying to call him. He got into the car, buckled Leo in, and started the engine. As he pulled out of the driveway, his phone buzzed. It was a text from Vance. "Filings submitted. The press has the package. It has begun." Donald merged onto the main road, driving toward the rising sun. The simple teacher was gone. The storm had arrived. The clock on the dashboard of David Reynolds' silver Porsche read 8:45 as he pulled into the executive parking spot at Retrotech headquarters. He killed the engine and checked his reflection in the rearview mirror, smoothing back his hair and adjusting his silk tie. He felt a strange vibration in his pocket, his phone buzzing incessantly, but he ignored it. He assumed it was Glenda Panic texting him about the login issues he had experienced earlier that morning. He had tried to check his email over coffee and found his credentials invalid. It was annoying, a typical IT screw-up, that he would fire someone for later, but it wasn't a crisis. He was the CEO. He was the golden boy. He was untouchable. He stepped out of the car and walked toward the glass entrance of the building. The morning sun bounced off the skyscraper, creating a halo of light that David felt was entirely appropriate for his arrival. He nodded at the security guard at the front desk, a man named Ralph who usually greeted him with a salute and a smile. Today, Ralph did not smile. He looked down at his monitor, his face pale, and refused to make eye contact. "Good morning, Ralph," David said, breezily swiping his badge at the turnstile. The light turned red. A harsh buzzer sounded. "Access denied." David frowned. He swiped again. Red light. Buzzer. Ralph opened the gate. David snapped, his patience evaporating. "My badge is malfunctioning. I cannot do that, Mr. Reynolds," Ralph said, his voice shaking. "I have strict orders." "Orders?" David laughed, a cold, incredulous sound. "Orders from who, Ralph?" "I give the orders here. Open the gate, or you are fired." "From the board of directors," Sir Ralph whispered. David froze. A cold prickle of unease ran down his spine. He looked around the lobby. It was quieter than usual. People were huddled in small groups, whispering and looking at their phones. When they saw him, they stopped talking and stared. It wasn't the look of admiration he was used to. It was the look people gave to a car crash. Suddenly, the elevator doors on the far side of the lobby opened, and two men in dark suits walked out. David recognized them immediately. They were the head of corporate security and the company's general counsel. They weren't smiling. "Mr. Reynolds," the general counsel said, walking up to the turnstile. "Please come with us. The board is waiting for you in the main conference room." David straightened his jacket. "Finally. Tell them to fix my access. I have a company to run." He followed them, not to the private executive elevator, but to the freight elevator in the back. He felt a surge of indignation, but he swallowed it. He would scream at them later. Right now, he needed to secure his position. He walked into the conference room, preparing his opening line, preparing to charm and bully his way out of whatever bureaucratic nonsense this was. He pushed the heavy glass doors open. The room was full. The entire board of directors was seated around the long oval table. But sitting at the head of the table in the chair reserved for the CEO was not the chairman. It was Victoria. His wife sat with her hands folded on the mahogany table. She looked regal, calm, and utterly terrifying. On the screen behind her, where David usually projected his quarterly earnings charts, was a single image. It was a bank statement, a statement from GM Consulting. David stopped in his tracks. The air left his lungs. "Victoria, what are you doing here?" he asked, his voice sounding small in the cavernous room. "Sit down, David," Victoria said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of a judge passing a death sentence. David looked at the other board members. He looked for an ally. He looked at Jim, the CFO, who usually laughed at his jokes. Jim was staring at the table. He looked at Sarah, the head of operations. She was looking at him with pure disgust. "I said sit down," Victoria repeated. David sank into the nearest empty chair. "What is this?" he demanded, trying to rally his arrogance. "Is this a hostile takeover?" "It is a forensic audit," Victoria said, tapping the file in front of her. "We have been up all night, David. We traced every penny, the unauthorized bonuses, the shell companies, the payments to private investigators, and the settlements paid to 3 former female employees under the guise of consulting fees." "That is a lie," David sputtered, but his face was turning a sickly shade of grey. "Those were legitimate business expenses. Glenda Miller is a highly rated consultant. Glenda Miller is your mistress," Victoria cut him off, her voice slicing through his lies like a razor. "And she is your accomplice in embezzlement and extortion. We have her emails, David. We have her bank records. We have the sworn affidavit from Sarah Jenkins detailing how you assaulted her and how you used company funds to buy her silence." The room went deadly silent. The word assaulted hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. "This is a misunderstanding," David stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. "I can explain. The market was—" "Shut up," Victoria said. "You are done, David. The board has already voted. You are terminated effective immediately for cause. You are stripped of your stock options. You are being sued by the company for restitution of the $3 million you stole. You can't do this." David stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I built this company. I am the face of Retrotech." "You are a liability," Victoria said, standing up to meet him. "And as for your personal life, I froze our joint accounts this morning. My lawyers filed for divorce an hour ago." "You have nothing, David. The car in the parking lot is leased in the company name." "The keys, please." David stared at her. He looked at the woman he had ignored and underestimated for 10 years. He saw the fire in her eyes and realized he had been playing with matches in a room full of gasoline. "Security," the general counsel said, stepping forward. "Please escort Mr. Reynolds from the building." 2 burly guards stepped forward. One of them grabbed David's arm. "Don't touch me," David screamed, pulling away. He looked at the board members. "You are making a mistake. I am the visionary here. You need me." They didn't even blink. The guards grabbed him firmly by both arms and dragged him toward the door. As he was hauled out into the hallway, kicking and shouting like a petulant child, he saw the elevator doors open. A group of people stepped out. They weren't employees. They held cameras and microphones. Victoria had invited the press. David tried to shield his face, but the flashbulbs exploded like lightning, blinding him. Reporters shouted questions over each other. "Mr. Reynolds, is it true you paid hush money to former staffers? Mr. Reynolds, do you have a comment on the allegations of fraud? Mr. Reynolds, are you the father of Glenda Miller's child?" The last question hit him harder than the rest. He stopped struggling. He stared into the camera lens, his eyes wide with shock. They knew. They knew everything. Meanwhile, 10 miles away, Glenda Miller was speeding down the highway. She was running late. Her morning had been a disaster. Donald leaving, the suitcase, the things he had said. Her mind was racing, trying to spin a narrative. He is crazy. He is having a breakdown. I will tell David that Donald is unstable. We can use it. We can say he is a danger to Leo and get full custody immediately. Yes, that was the plan. She would paint Donald as the villain. She just needed to get to the office. She needed to solidify her promotion. Once she was COO, she would have the power to crush him. She pulled into the Retrotech parking lot. She noticed a news van parked near the entrance, but she didn't think much of it. Retrotech was a big company. They were always in the news. She checked her makeup in the mirror, applying a fresh coat of red lipstick. Armor. She needed armor. She grabbed her briefcase and walked toward the entrance. She saw Ralph, the security guard, talking to a police officer. That was strange. She walked past them, her heels clicking on the pavement. "Good morning, Ralph," she said, keeping her head high. Ralph looked at her. He didn't say good morning. He just pointed. "That is her," he said to the police officer. Glenda stopped. "Excuse me?" "Ms. Glenda Miller," the officer asked, stepping forward. He was holding a thick envelope. "Yes," Glenda said, confused. "Is there a problem?" "You are being served, ma'am," the officer said, thrusting the envelope into her hands. "Served?" Glenda laughed nervously. "With what?" "A parking ticket, divorce petition, and a civil summons for fraud and emotional distress," the officer said. Glenda stared at the envelope. Donald Miller vs. Glenda Miller. And below that, Retrotech Corp vs. Glenda Miller. She felt the ground sway beneath her feet. Retrotech? Why was the company suing her? She looked up and saw people in the lobby pressed against the glass, staring at her. Some were pointing, Some were filming with their phones. She pushed past the officer and ran into the lobby. She needed to find David. David would fix this. David would tell them to back off. She swiped her badge. Access denied. She swiped it again. Access denied. She looked at the reception desk. The receptionist, a girl Glenda had reprimanded last week for wearing the wrong shade of blue, was watching her with a look of pure schadenfreude. "Call David," Glenda demanded, her voice rising to a shriek. "My badge isn't working." "Call David Reynolds immediately. He can't take your call, Ms. Miller," the receptionist said coolly. "He has been escorted from the building." "What?" Glenda gasped. "Turn around," the receptionist said, pointing to the large flat-screen TV mounted on the wall of the waiting area. Glenda turned. The screen was tuned to the local news channel. The headline banner was bright red and pulsing. Breaking news. Retrotech CEO ousted in fraud and harassment scandal. And there on the screen was a split image. On the left was a video of David being dragged out of the building by security, looking disheveled and frantic. On the right was a photo of Glenda. It was her company headshot, the one she was so proud of. But the caption beneath it didn't say marketing executive. It read, "The Enforcer, executive accused of blackmailing victims." The news anchor's voice filled the lobby. Documents released this morning by a whistleblower allege that Glenda Miller, a senior executive at Retrotech, operated a shell company to launder money used to silence women who accused CEO David Reynolds of misconduct. The documents also include a paternity test revealing that Miller's son, whom she raised with her husband, is actually the biological child of Reynolds. Glenda felt her knees give way. It wasn't a figure of speech. Her legs simply stopped working. She collapsed onto the hard marble floor, her briefcase spilling open. The lipstick she had applied for armor felt like clown paint. The room was spinning. The whispers of the people in the lobby grew into a roar. "That's her. That's the woman. She took the money. She cheated on her husband." She scrambled to grab her phone. Her hands were shaking so badly she dropped it twice. She needed help. She needed a lifeline. She dialed David. "The number you have reached is no longer in service." Victoria had cancelled his phone.